Give it up for Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm an infrastructure engineer at Etsy, and you might just be able to tell that I'm English. There's two of us. So I joined Etsy in 2014, working from London, remotely from the rest of my team based in Brooklyn. And it was the first time in my life that I had to communicate with the rest of my team through video rather than in person, kind of more often than not. And I found it a deeply unsatisfying experience. I did a bunch of reading back then to work out how to be an effective remote employee. There's tons of stuff that's been written about that. But most of the stuff that I'd read, it inferred that the video conferencing part of it was the easy bit. There were no sort of specific skills you needed to learn to do that effectively. And I think we're actually facing a problem in that that's more intrinsic than things like bandwidth and frame rate. And it's eyeline. It turns out that perceiving other people as avoiding your eyeline is actually more damaging than not being able to see their faces at all. So there is something we can all do to make this better, first off. I don't think of myself as a particularly narcissistic person. I hope this isn't just me. But whenever I look at this screen, literally all I can see is my face in the bottom right-hand corner, gurning back at me. If you possibly can, turn off self-view. If you can't turn off self-view, if your software doesn't let you, then acquire some post-it notes, stick them on the screen, stop looking at your own face. And that means you're now looking at the face of the person who's talking. Except you're not, and that's kind of the fundamental problem. It turns out it's physically impossible to tell where someone's looking just by using a laptop screen and camera. You just lose that information entirely. And that stuff's kind of a problem. If we look at this example, these are some of my great colleagues. They're all looking at the person who's talking. They're looking at that person's face on their screen. But it means that they're looking away from the camera. So you can't tell what they're looking at. They might be checking their email. And the psychological impact of this is actually kind of significant, particularly if you're the person who's talking and you're trying to work out what someone else's reaction is to what you're saying. Knowing the response to the incredibly insightful point you're making is impossible unless you can see people's eyes. And this eye information, this eyeline information, is something we use both for that, but also to work out who wants to speak next, where someone's gaze is directed, what their mood is like. And if you remove that channel of information, that non-verbal channel, it's kind of significant. So we could of course all just look at the camera, but that means that we're now not looking at the face of the person who's talking, which I think I'd argue is worse, particularly given that they perceive you as looking at them now. So in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a ton of research stuff done into this stuff. But seemingly not very much since then. And if you think of this just as a problem of being able to look into a camera and be able to see a screen at the same time, it's easy to see why, because that's a teleprompter. And back in the 50s, we solved this problem. It uses this Pepper's Ghost technique of casting an image onto an angled piece of glass and then mounting a camera behind the piece of glass so that you look through the image into the camera. And there are things being produced today which look an awful lot like a teleprompter, but attached to your laptop. This one is slightly north of $500, but it's 100% Oregon made. So, and that technique is fine if you're just talking to one person, but if you're talking to a room full of people, then now everybody perceives you as looking directly at them, even if you're looking at one person in particular, or again, you're reading your email, you're reading Twitter. How can they tell? So there's a few attempts to solve this problem. These are 3 examples. These all use big installation-based systems. They have multiple screens, multiple cameras. They use things like face rendering, pupil rendering separate to the face, which is very, very technically accomplished, but it's not going to cut it if you're huddled around your laptop in the corner of Cova. VR and AR seem to be where all this technology is headed. This is Microsoft's version of that. They're a sponsor. 2 dudes high-fiving. So we all use this, at least I use this, for things that are much more significant than only work. I talk to my family. These are my parents. That's my cat in the middle. I talk to my therapist. I talk to my partner. So I need to be able to feel more connected to the people that I'm talking to rather than less. I need the technology to get out of the way. And the research consistently finds that unless you're trying to convey something specifically visual, then getting rid of that video channel entirely ends up with being a much more effective way, a much more rewarding way of communicating, just using audio. So if you can, turn off the self-view, unless you're trying to frame a nice picture of your cat. Try it with just the audio. Try turning off that video screen. But most importantly, understand this is happening, that it may be affecting you. Thank you very much.